And another major issue with the models, the general expectation for climate change is that as the planets warm up, the temperature warms up, you see more evaporation from the oceans as the oceans heat up. That makes more moisture available in the atmosphere, generally, and also changes the atmospheric temperature profiles to enable the atmosphere to hold more moisture as well. Now that can be offset to some degree by changes in atmospheric circulation patterns. And so there's questions there about what's going to win out, particularly over southern Australia. Are we going to ultimately see the increased moisture availability win out, or the changes in atmospheric circulation patterns actually carrying that to some degree, winning out, or is it going to win out in the short term? Which one's going to work? So that's another big question. The climate models don't represent climate changes in the hydrological cycle very well. There's some recent work suggesting that the hydrological cycle is probably ramping up about twice as quickly as the models suggest, which has some big implications for things like rainfall extremes and even changes in mean rainfall. But essentially that message that wet places in the north of Australia and the tropics are expected to get wetter, dry places to get drier is certainly what we're expecting. And we're seeing long-term drying trends in the April to September period particularly, which has across southern Australia in those orange areas in that map. So what's some of the information available? We have a new updated surface area temperature measurements called AcornSat, and there's been a lot of work putting into making that, analysing the Australian temperature record as accurate as we can to make that extremely robust. And there's a number of sites around Australia available where you can get really accurate temperature records from those stations. That's showing warming trends right across Australia in maximum, minimum temperatures and mean temperatures. There's a new piece of work out called Plindex, which the University of New South Wales and the Climate Change Centre for Excellence over there are put together, which enables you to pull out climate extremes for rainfall and temperature for various stations around Australia. Of course, the Bureau's Climate Data Online is certainly a very good resource for daily and monthly temperature records and rainfall records. And with something called the Australian Water Availability Project. So what the Bureau does every day is take all of our station records, bring all those together, quality control them, run an interpolation scheme onto a grid across a 5-kilometre grid resolution across Australia to produce maps of things like rainfall, temperature, humidity, solar radiation, and things like vegetation. And that's freely available as well. That's an indication of the type of map that we see that's freely available from that grid data information. And just to finish up, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change fifth assessment report is being released in September. The Working Group 1 report is going out in September, and that's the latest update of the science that's been going on in climate change. I guess I'd like to say we'd like to see big advances going on in terms of the understanding of the science, big leaps forward. What I've seen in terms of the early indications is that there's certainly some useful improved information, improved understanding of sea level rise projections. They're actually using the word virtually certain apparently, which is a very, very strong wording in terms of what they're saying for things like the global temperature rises and the changes that we're seeing around the planet. But we have to be a little bit careful. It's not going to provide all the answers that we're looking for, unfortunately, and we're still going to face these continuing challenges with not having as much information as we'd like, or perhaps the information in the form we'd like. We have to do the best with that and try and make our adaptation toolkits adaptable in a way that we can bring in new information as it comes available. Now, one of the things that's coming out of that's going to come out in terms of Australian response to this new information from the AR5 report is a climate change projections portal using the broad-scale NRM regions which have been developed at a national level, and I'm also involved in some work trying to include local government regions in that climate change projection portal as well. That's a graph there of some of the early results of temperature projections, and once again it's basically indicating the red line is a continued dig it all up and burn it, climate change scenario where we see 6 to 8 degrees of global temperature rise. The blue line there is if we take a little bit of action to reduce emissions, take up some renewables, and continue to burn a fair bit of fossil fuel, we still get over 2 degrees of temperature rise since the beginning of industrialisation. And the green line there, which does keep us below that 2 degree limit, does actually see a little bit further warming over the next few decades, and they're starting to cool past 2100. That's a very strong climate change action scenario that's seen that keeping us below that 2 degrees. So we can still do it, but to do that we actually have to take pretty strong action, and from that scenario they actually have to put in place mechanisms to suck carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere towards the end of the 21st century to do that. And just to finish, those sea level rise projections, the fifth assessment, a little bit skewed out. The fourth assessment report on the left there was indicating something around 25 to 50 centimetres. They weren't able to indicate what was happening with sea level ice sheets from Greenland and Antarctica. The latest work over the last few decades in those other bars there is indicating sea level rise much closer to the metre mark and certainly possibly exceeding the metre by 2100. And we can't forget that the sea level rise doesn't stop at 2100. We're looking very much at the possibility of multi-metre sea level rise past 2100, so 3 to 4 metres emerging through the 22nd century. So it doesn't, as I've hopefully pointed out, we are talking about an issue that's going to stretch out over centuries and even thousands of years. We are changing the planet over those sorts of time frames. And one of the big questions is, how much are we going to change the planet? We are going to have to adapt, certainly, there's no doubt about that. We can't get away from that, and that is what we're all here for. That's why we're all here today. But one of the questions is, we can reduce how much we're going to have to adapt. And it's really heartening. I really really thank the government for putting in place policies that mean, living in South Australia, we're seeing 20% of our energy coming from renewable sources already, and it'd be really great to see that continuing. So the government here is doing great things with mitigation, and I really also applaud the government's efforts around adaptation as well, to bring everyone together, get everyone talking. I think is really key to this process. So we're on the road. We've started down this process, but we're going to be doing this for a while. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Darren. And I need to nod like this, and a magical bottle of wine will appear. So, thank you. I'd like to take a